What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction. Back with the third and final movement in the opening salvo of our classical days for this coming week, and that is of Beethoven's 8th Piano Sonata, the Pathetique, as performed by Daniel Barenboim in 1984. I didn't mention any history in the first two movements, so just to give a brief synopsis as I understand it, this piece was written in 1798 when Beethoven, I think, was 27, at the very least in the second half of his 20s. I think it was published a year later, so right at the end of the 18th century. And this last movement is a rondo, which I think relates to the recurrence of a particular theme. I think that's like the form of the movement, and then the musical direction is Allegro, which is to say quickly. So this is another faster movement, certainly by comparison with the previous movement. And yes, this one I would say I'm the least familiar with by memory, meaning I've probably heard it exactly as many times as I've heard, maybe not the second movement. I probably have heard the second movement more, in part because of Nota Me Cantabile, a show I talked about particularly in the second movement reaction. But with the first movement and the third movement, I probably heard them an equal number of times because I hear them when I listen to the sonata in total. So yes, I remember it or can think of its parts the least clearly as it relates to the other two movements. So I think it is a fitting end to the sonata, but maybe not the most memorable part of it. I think the first movement with its mischief and its alternating tempos, and then the sheer elegance, the slow singing-like beauty of the second movement are perhaps more standout than this third movement. But it is a lovely finish to the sonata, so let's give it a listen. This is Beethoven's 8th Sonata, the third movement, which is, as I said, an Allegro, which is to be played quickly, and it is performed by Daniel Barenboim. and I love that hint at that sprightly melodic run of the first movement there at the end. So yeah, there are some parts of that as soon as they began to play, it's like, ah yes, like this section where again there's one phrase that ends in some very forte chords. I enjoy that. I do enjoy this movement has some very rapid and dexterous melodic lines and sections as well. And I was actually thinking, I mean, this is much later in the Notame Cantabile series. In fact, it finishes with a couple movies, and I think this is in one of the movies, and it's actually while Notame, the character, is playing Mozart. But when she's playing, there's some people observing and commenting, and they're talking about how she's playing just very well, and as if like every stroke of the keys is producing these light and round bubbles of sound. And as I was hearing some of the sections there, especially the faster sections, I feel like Mr. Barenboim was articulating that same crisp, light bubbles of melodic sound with his playing. So yes, ultimately I think it is a fitting end to the sonata. All three movements are great. I will say that middle movement to me is untouchable, one of the best slow movements that I've heard, and ultimately one of my favorite movements in any piece. But yes, the first movement is great, as I said, with its alternating tempos and its heavier feel and more solemn atmosphere mixed with that light and a bit mischievous tempo and energy. And then I think this last movement, puts a forte and powerful end to the sonata overall. So yes, well written by Mr. Beethoven, lovely playing by Mr. Barenboim. As I said, this is just the opening part of what will be a week of classical music, sonatas, concertos, symphonies, overtures, suites, and more. So I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think, whether about this movement specifically, the sonata overall. I will put, maybe in all three, certainly in the second video, a link to my watch-along of Notame Cantabile, because if you like classical music, if you like this piece, and especially if you like that second movement, it's worth checking out. And even if you've never watched any Japanese television before, you might find yourself compelled to watch the whole series, during which you'll hear Brahms' First Symphony, Beethoven's Seventh Symphony, Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto in D, and many, many more amazing pieces, and again, including Mozart. So, yes, do let me know what you think, and I will see you for the next one. Peace.